All right, Polly. 30 seconds until cheese. Also, the live stream. 30, 29, 28, 27, 26, 25, wait, 24, 23, 22, 21, 20, 19, 18, 17, 16, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Get it? Yeah, okay. All right. Everybody gets a live stream. Well, as you can see, we are upping the production values here at New Age Sword and Sorcery with new high-tech bibs and bobs. We've got an overlay. We've got Polly showing up there. It's all good. We have a cheese. Didn't have cheese before. Anyway, we are just barely starting the live stream. 3 of our 4 special guests that are waiting in the wings to come on, so I'm not going to keep them waiting too long. And hopefully our last guest there arrives soon. Yeah, this is the sort of first 5 minutes where I kind of waffle while we allow people to get in the door. As you do, please throw up comments in the chat so that we can know people are arriving. And also just to say hi, it's nice. You are more than welcome to sort of, pipe up with your own thoughts and feelings and questions along the way. And if I can, I'll check them up and maybe, a lot of us can discuss them with you. So yes, New Age Sword and Sorcery, it's a crowdfund, it's a magazine, it's both, why not? Things are going well. We just broke 36,000 this morning, which was very satisfying. We have hit minimum funding. We have hit double art, meaning every story will get 2 illustrations. Every article will get 2 illustrations, except for the very long stories, which will get 4. And we've hit international shipping discount. I've still got to update the graphic on the crowdfund page. So whatever you see there right now, you can knock $5 off for the Canadians and $10 off for everybody else outside of the United States. Not too shabby. And also, we're getting there. We're making good progress towards our first author pay raise stretch goal. And from there, it's just authors, artists, just pay raises as far as we can get with the crowdfund. So please know that your pledges will be helping towards that. And that's pretty cool. We're pretty big on trying to, the more we succeed, the more we can share that, hopefully, with the people who help make the magazine happen, right? So yeah, tonight is seemingly a simple question, but I think one always worth discussing. What is sword and sorcery? Even if you're going, yeah, I know what it is, man. I hope you still enjoy the conversation because, like I said, I brought on some special guests here from a variety of points of view, publishers, podcasters, authors, often overlap with many of them. And most of them are quite experienced with the genre. One of them is a very enthusiastic newcomer. I thought that'd be kind of cool to throw in the mix. And yeah, why don't we just get into it? So I'm going to see if I can further use this high-tech platform here. Maybe there's some cheese I need to use as well. Why don't we start with, oh, hey, there we go. Here he is. Matthew John, brace yourself.
'Tis I.
There we go.
Me? I only see you and I. How are you?
I'm doing well. Don't worry, we've got the other guests in like the green room. I'm going to bring them on one by one here.
We're doing a slow reveal. I see.
Yes. No, it's all just we reveal our contributors and our stretch goals gradually. So we reveal our guests. Next up is Milton Davis. We'll do proper intros in a sec, but I'm just going to get you all here. Hello. Then we have. Why don't we get another publisher, Dave Ring of Neon Hemlock, who is muted. But has a dog, so we'll forgive it.
Classic muting, entering the chat. I do have a dog as penance.
All right, so that brings our quota of dogs for this evening up to 2. We're doing well. And then finally, we're bringing up Luana.
Hello.
All the way over from sunny Europe. And by sunny, I mean, what is it, like midnight there? Thank you so much for joining us so late.
It is absolutely pitch black midnight. It's 1 a.m.
There we go. Much appreciated.
Dedication, man.
Yeah, no, we've gone global here with our sword and sorcery discussion, which I think is a good way to do it. At least 3 countries in play here. Yeah. So, all right. Real quick around the table because there's 5 of us. We'll do intros. I mean, I'm Oliver Brackenbury of Brackenbury Books. I do New Age and Sorcery. People know that. So let's move on quickly to. We'll start with you, Matt.
Sure. Matt John or Matthew John I put Rogue of Many Hats on there because I really do a lot of stuff in Sword and Sorcery. I do a podcast called Rogues in the House. I have written for the Conan board game for a while. I have just finished my project on the Conan the Hyborian Age role-playing game, which I think actually just concluded its pledge manager phase. I'm writing more for that right now for the next wave of content. I write Sword and Sorcery stories. I have a book out called To Walk on Worlds. I would encourage you all to check out. I've been in New Edge Sword and Sorcery, Old Moon Quarterly, and book 2 Within the Weeping Eye will be out in June, most likely. So, follow me on socials in all the regular places that aren't X or Twitter or whatever that shite is now, because I'm not there. But most other places you will find me.
Right on. Milton, for people who might not have seen you here before, who are you, buddy?
I'm Milton Davis, author/publisher on the company MV Media. We specialize in science fiction and fantasy based on African diaspora culture and traditions. And I write Sword and Soul, which is sword and sorcery based on African diaspora culture and traditions. I published the Griot's Anthology, which is a collection of sword and soul stories. I published in conjunction with Charles Saunders. My Changa Safari series is, I guess, my contribution to Sword and Sorcery, 4-book series. It's actually historical fantasy because it takes place in East Africa and that time period. And also the co-creator of Kikanga, which is a Sword and Soul role-playing game that we created a few years ago. And me and Balogun Ojitade, and we've been writing stories from that, and actually getting ready to jump in the 2.0 version of it and drop some new novels as well. So that's me.
Awesome. All right, Dave, who are you, buddy?
Hi. I'm the managing editor and publisher over at Neon Hemlock. And I feel like I'm a guest in this space because I'm not predominantly a sword and sorcery editor, although my upcoming anthology, Shatter the Sun, Queer Tales of Untold Adventure, is a sword and sorcery anthology. And I've been a reader, sometimes writer, and enjoyer of the genre for a long time. So grateful to be here.
Yeah, and I mean, hey, we're happy to have a guest. I mean, you're sort of the representative of a few people. We'll talk about this more down the road from the kind of like horror-y, other genre spaces that have kind of been poking their heads into SNS over the last 2 years. Yeah, so that's a whole bunch of publishers. Would we dare invite a non-publisher? Let's find out. Hi, Luana.
Hi, I'm not a lot of things, so. Hi, everybody. My name is Luana. I am a very, very amateur author. I just recently had a couple of publications. My first ever one was last year, the summer 2024, in Swords and Sorcery magazine. For some reason, the title of it is in my caption, "Loves Red Blossom." I didn't put it there, but
All good.
And I will be featured in the upcoming, I think, issue 5 of New Edge Sword and Sorcery. I've got the cover story, yay! So I must have impressed somebody with that Loves Red Blossom. I had one other non-sword and sorcery fantasy story published like just a couple months ago, and a few more on sub. So I am. I'm working at it.
You are. Well, thank you so much for joining us because I made a joke about it, but I like the idea of having someone who doesn't publish SNS on the panel, but also someone who, like, I feel, at least in my personal experience, like you're quite new, but you've come into the SNS scene with a great deal of enthusiasm and have been like really working hard to like meet people in the scene and stuff. And I think that energy is really cool. And I thought it might be nice to have that POV of someone who hasn't been marinating in it for a long time, like the rest of us. So yeah, by all means, please don't be shy just because you haven't run a publishing company or something.
I'm never shy.
That's true.
Thank you.
Okay, so as I was saying before we came on camera, I think it bears repeating real quick. Setup. Something that people in lots of different fan spaces fall into occasionally is this thing where you love X, let's say you love Sword and Sorcery so much and have loved it for so long that you kind of forget to like articulate for other people what it is, or maybe you kind of tell them, but you're along the way, you've almost lost the vocabulary of how to like present it to a newbie. You're just kind of like, this is awesome. This is great. You should read this. Here's a list of like things to read and watch and listen to. But you kind of forget to really fully articulate why the other person might be interested in, why they would care. And I feel like it'd be good for us to start kind of in the shallow end of the pool with talking about our Sword and Sorcery, lives tonight. And just, I know you all have probably given this in a lot of interviews, Matt, Milton, and Dave, but why don't we give, the 10-cent version of how we discovered the genre? And this is key, I think. Why do we like it? Why is this thing good? Why do we vibe with it? So, I'll keep going around the table in the order I can see your faces on the screen. Matt, why don't you get us started?
It's funny because I find in the Sword and Sorcery community, we're not as forthcoming with like what it is, but we are very quick to point out what it is not. Right? If someone says, it's the latest Sword and Sorcery adventure featuring Harry Potter, we're like, what? No, just because it has swords and sorcery. But
is that a magic system? Get out of here. Yeah.
Yeah, magic system. Ew. No, I mean, for me, it's aesthetic is the first thing that drew me to it, right? It's Masters of the Universe and old Conan comics. It's Beefcake. It's Chainmail Bikini. I should say it was, right? Like there was that certain 80s painted Earl Norham, Frank Frazetta, Vallejo sort of look that the visual had the huge impression on me as a young person, to the point of like giving me body dysmorphia, I'm sure. And so, but then, you actually read the seminal works as you get older and you realize that Sword and Sorcery is kind of fantasy without the nonsense. Now, and I don't even really mean that in a mean sense. I mean that it's like the story and the character and the desire and the adventure are the main bit. In the world building parts, they get sort of peppered in as you go. Sometimes it's just straight up history, like as Milton was saying. But it takes the nonsense out, puts the characters forward, and makes them have to do stuff. And it's oftentimes just fully fledged characters who are already who they are. Doesn't mean they don't have an arc. It doesn't mean they don't evolve. It doesn't mean they're flat. It's just, I find it gets to the freaking point, and which I think is, again, why a lot of people think that the short story format is kind of what serves it best, though I'm not necessarily thinking that is what you have to do. But yeah, that's I think a big part of what it is and the attraction. And then you factor in things like heavy metal and not the magazine, but like, I'm wearing a Black Sabbath t-shirt, but like there's certain things that fall into the Venn diagram, which has always made me very attracted to that version of fantasy as opposed to something a little more shiny.
Right on. How about you, Milton? What was your sort of gateway drug, and why do you feel like drawn to this genre?
Well, I think the definition is very simple. It's a genre that has swords and it has sorcery. I mean, that's basically it. It's kind of self-explanatory. I got into it basically through Conan, specifically through the Conan comic books that Marvel was publishing back in the day. My cousin was a big comic book buff, and he knew I was into historical stuff. And he said, hey, you might like this comic book. And he showed it to me, and I started reading the comic books, and I'm like, oh, hey, this is really cool. This is kind of like, appeals to me because, Howard did a lot of historical references, more than I actually realized until after I started really digging into some research, and I came across some of the stuff, some of the terms, some of the people he was using in the Conan stories. And I'm like, oh, so this is where he got this from, that kind of stuff like that, So for me, it's mainly it's historical aspect, and a lot of stuff that Matthew said, I agree with. In Sword and Sorcery, it's more personal. It's more personal. It's about that particular person or those people going through an adventure or something like that. There may be some big things happening in the background, but that character's not concerned with that. When you look at epic fantasy and other stuff like that, it's like somebody has to find this, and if they don't find this, it's going to change the world. And it's always this world changing, earth shattering, empires falling, and all this kind of stuff like that. Whereas with, you know, a sword and sorcery character, he's just trying to get to the next day. You know, I'm just trying to get through this and get to the next day, and all this other stuff is just around me and happening and stuff like that. And I think that's what makes it appeal to me, is that it's very personal. And so when people say that characters are not well developed, it is in a way, because if you do even when you do a series about the same character in short stories, that's when their character and their personality comes out. You know, that's how we learn the type of person that Conan is. When you're reading Eric or El Bonet, you know, that's how you learn the kind of character they are through those series of stories, and that's where the character development takes place. So for me, that's what you know, makes it ring true to me, and especially having the opportunity to be able to take this same, you know, genre and work in the you know, African diaspora culture as well, and give it to me, it resonates to me because it reflects, you know, my culture and my history, but at the same time it brings a uniqueness to the story, because you're introducing situations and scenarios and mythologies and characters that you don't normally find, you know, in this particular genre. So, you know, that's where I come from.
Right on. How about you, Dave?
I mean, this question's right on the name of the panel I signed up for, and I still am a little reluctant to dig into it, because part of it, I think, is kind of like what Matt said about knowing what it isn't. I came into the genre from playing the Dark Sun as a kid.
Yeah.
For years, that was like my RPG of choice. And so like the art of Brahm is what is like burned into my brain, is like, this is what sword and sorcery is. So maybe like a little bit on the less chainmail, but like no, if anything, like even more thigh, you know. So that's where I came in, and then I moved away from it for a while, maybe in college, and then came back through Samuel Delaney and Navarion, and which like hooked me back into it and reminded me of like what I loved about the genre to begin with. So I've kind of come in and out of the genre.
What brought you round back again for Shadow of the Sun?
Well, so I started writing some short fiction on my own that was pulling from that Navarion well. And then also I Tanith Lee. So I was reading a lot of Tanith Lee's stuff that was on the sword and sorcery side. And that sort of got it percolating for me. And I had done some other like id projects, like a queer witch project and a post-apocalyptic project. And then it was like, all right, now I got to do the like desert muscles, bad magic, whole kind of thing, and that's how I arrived back, you know.
I like the kind of almost fridge poetry way of finding your way to SMS, like desert muscles.
I mean, desert and muscles could be an anthology, and I would probably buy it. The Brahm cover, oh my god!
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome, man. Now, Luana, I know from us chatting on Discord, you know, you were exposed to SNS quite young, but you've burst into the scene quite recently. So, you know, what happened there? Why does SNS mean a lot to you, and what brought you around to it again more recently?
I guess that the earliest that I can remember really getting into SNS was of course, technically I saw the John Milius Conan first, you know, earlier than everything. I guess if we want to quibble, I saw Thundercats as a kid, but maybe the technology makes it not quite SNS. I'm not sure.
It could be more Sword and Planet. Sword and Tigers.
Sure.
Sword and Lion-O, yeah. Anyway.
No, but yeah, so I saw the John Milius Conan, and around the turn of the century, I got into the Dark Horse Conan comics, actually, the Cary Nord, Kurt Busiek, Tim Truman, and I had started also getting into the Robert E. Howard original short stories, because a lot of them are simply free online.
Mhm.
And I found that at that point, English not being my first language, that the comics were a good aid in sort of helping me understand what is actually happening. Uh, and
Makes sense.
I went, I read the stories first. I'm sorry, I read the comics first and then went into the Howard stories. And I mean, we've been giggling about it, but it is the muscles. It is the hotness. It is the strength that kept me coming back. And it is kind of the concept of Conan being sort of an asshole, and he's not Aragorn or Frodo or Gandalf trying to you know fight the forces of evil or whatever. I mean, he does end up fighting the forces of evil because they are keeping him from his next big score or whatever, but he's not doing it out of the kindness of his heart. It's just a situation that he ends up in, and I think, and he always ends up triumphant because he's just the baddest mother, and that is, you know, I was an action kid growing up. I was Matt knows this very well. I'm a big Arnold
Yeah.
fan, and the appeal of Arnold and the other classic '80s action heroes is that they might get shot once near the end of the third act, but they will absolutely dominate the movie. That's why we're watching it. We need them to kick ass and maybe do some bad punning and live vicariously through them. And Conan felt like he was the granddaddy of all of that stuff. Sometimes he'd be a warlord, sometimes he'd be a thief, sometimes he'd be a pirate, and he would be the best at every fucking thing he tried. And that sort of like, ooh, this guy is the hottest and coolest and most capable dude of all. And even if you throw him in these weird situations that he is completely technically unprepared for, through sheer grit and determination, he will get through it, or at least escape where lesser men will not. And it sounds very base, but that is a very satisfying reading experience. That the concept of dominating your space, the idea of being successful at whatever you put your mind to, and living your life unafraid, and that's kind of a big deal. So, in the face of all that weirdness, in the space of all those frontier lands, undiscovered countries, whatever. That's what Sword and Sorcery was for me. That's the appeal.
Right on. And what made you decide, in recent months, like, hey, I'm gonna go find this, what the community is, and I'm gonna submit some stories. What made you cross that line?
It was I started listening to so over the years I started reading it, started getting into not just Howard but like Moorcock, Wagner, the big names, Vance, and a friend of mine recommended the Rogues in the House podcast. And yeah, you might have heard of it. And I think the Rogues recommended, or you talked about New Edge, this upcoming magazine, and you had a submission for a sticker flash story.
Yes,
Oh
back in
wow,
the spring.
that is quite recent, like ish.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I was like, I haven't written in like I used to, write privately as a kid, as a teenager. And I was like, why not? Let me just try it. It didn't make it, but it did make it into Swords and Sorcery magazine. So I was like, I got it anyway, so let me shop it around.
That
And
is really, not to interrupt, but like
go
the
ahead.
fact that you come back from writing from when you were a kid, and I know this wasn't that long ago because I was part of that whole thing, and I don't know, congrats. Like
Oh,
that
thank you.
shows you've obviously got the knack. And man, I swear to God, it took me it took me sucking for a while before I would even, anyone would want to take a look at that. So anyway,
Well,
I didn't
yeah,
realize you were that. I didn't realize I had thought you had come from writing, other stuff for a while, and then we're just like, oh yeah, I'm going to do some sword and sorcery now. But the fact that, you're fresh back on the writing scene since childhood is very impressive.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I guess it took me just being in a community, just people talking about it enthusiastically and being very welcoming, and that's all it takes for me, really. Because if I don't want to bother people with this type of stuff, like if my friends aren't necessarily into genre fiction or don't read a whole lot, like my real life friends, I mean. But finding a community that is full of writers and readers, that was really all I needed. So yeah, here I am on this
Well, and if
podcast talking about why I like sword and sorcery.
Well, well, hey, and also if I can just also interrupt to compliment you. For anybody watching, listening now, or recording later, the one is a demonstration of how persistence can pay off. Because Love's Red Blossom and Flash Fiction, I didn't even get to read it; it didn't get shortlisted. Then the one I submitted to our short story open call for like 4,000, 6,000 word stories in the summer didn't make a shortlist. But then the one I added a few hundred words to Love Red Blossom, sent it to SNS magazine, if I understand correctly. And then I read that, liked it, and reached out to Luana to commission a story for the magazine. So there you go. It kind of came around in a way. The Flash submission worked for you once it had been reworked and submitted and published somewhere else. You never know how the
after you were punished
is going to happen
for the grueling process of subbing to a place, and then okay, you did it. Now you're invited, because it's so much easier when you're invited, guys. As I'm sure you know.
Well, and you never know, right? And this is also part of why, I encourage people not to ignore smaller venues. I mean, I have no shade on Curtis Outlet and SNS Magazine, which is, by the way, a great magazine. I highly recommend people check it out.
It's been going for a long time.
Going for 13 years, be online.
Yes.
I'm actually going to have Curtis on the podcast soon, so he'll get a chance to share this himself via the medium of Oliver. What the hell's my point? Anyway, my point is that sometimes people only pay attention to the highest paying venues, and then they kind of feel like, what's the point even about the lower paying ones or whatever. And it's like, the point is you might get spotted anywhere is what I'm trying to highlight and underline. The point is you should, as long as they're on the up and up, you should give all venues a chance, in my opinion, and not give up on your stories, give up on yourself until you've exhausted all venues, because you never know how things are going to play out. So yeah, thank you for sharing that with us, Lana. So, okay, and I guess I should, in theory, do it, but I feel like I've done it so many times to Ness readers. So, but we have new ones coming into the crowdfund. So I guess I'll just say real brief. I am, your classic 42-year-old white guy off the shelf. I read Savage Sword of Conan as a kid, loved it. Saw 1982 Conan, loved it. But I actually didn't touch fantasy for a very long time afterward. It wasn't until 2018 or something. I was hanging out at a science fiction archive that we have in Toronto. I'm lucky enough to live near, and I just realized, all of a sudden, wait, I've never read the actual prose stories. I just read those comics and watched the movie as a kid. So I picked up some Lancer Conans at the archive, started reading them, lucked into a pile of the Lancers at a local store, and just was off to the races, and ended up beginning what felt like doing my bachelor degree in SNS. As I just went and read as much as I possibly could to get caught up on Morkak, Leiber, Wagner, Vance, all the gang. And so, yeah, and then, eventually things happened, and I eventually started doing the magazine. We don't need to hear that origin story again. In terms of why it means a lot to me, I really vibe with just about everything y'all have said, so I won't repeat too much of it, but definitely, I always found it, whether when I was a kid and again when I picked it up later as an adult, I always found it more relatable. I could relate a lot more to characters who were just trying to get through the day, just trying to survive, just trying to get the girl, or get some money, survive horrifying circumstances, than I could sort of epic scale tales where the world is, generally speaking, ending in one form or another. And then as an adult, discovering it at the beginnings of people using the phrase Marvel fatigue or superhero fatigue. Again, movies I've enjoyed as much as anybody, but tend to have a big blue hole in the sky that people have to do something about in the last act. It was refreshing again as an adult to find stories that tend to focus on people who are working on that smaller, more relatable scale. And scrambling for money is only more relatable as an adult. So yeah, to me, I've always liked that. I've also, one thing I don't know we've gotten too much into already, is I've always liked how the fantastic elements are treated in SNS. I like how they tend to not be codified, tend not to have a magic system, but also tend not to be like, oh, I've seen this thing in D&D, I know this is going to go. Tend to be more like unique, strange creatures than like, basically weird animals in an ecology. Yes, sometimes Lovecraftian, but almost always like something alien to the main character. They
Something
don't
special.
know, Yeah.
Something that stands out interestingly. That's always been a big thing for me. It's not like this. There's owl bears that exist, and here's one in this story. It's like, what is this thing?
Yeah, and I mean, there's a satisfaction to that kind of storytelling and piecing all the Lego bricks together.
Oh,
but
I've done
I want to
it.
be. I like being surprised. I like characters to surprise. And I mean, Conan, to come back to what you were saying, Luana, like so capable, but his being so capable and yet not, unstoppable is really satisfying because once in a while he runs into something like an elephant man space astronaut sorcerer guy, and he just like stops cold and doesn't know what to do and doesn't necessarily do what you think he'll do. I mean, that story I'm alluding to, Conan's empathy saves him.
Mhm.
And in many stories, as tough as he is when he runs into something like this, whether it's a sorcerer or an eldritch god or whatever, his cunning, his cleverness saves him. And so that's one thing I've also always liked about the character of Conan and so many SNS protagonists that followed, is that they tend to be a little they tend to be well-rounded, as much as this cliche is they're just biceps, carrying a sword and a woman over their arm or whatever. I do think that in a weird way, there's definitely more depth to SNS characters than people expect, including the big boy himself, Conan. And that's part of what drew me to want to publish and see, what we can do with that. So SNS, like, I feel, I've been in it as a publisher for 2.5 years. I've been sort of poking around and getting to know like what the contemporary scene is for, I guess, 4.5 now. Wow. And it started pretty early with me reading a really great book that I wish I had at hand here, but I'm just going to recommend that to everybody watching who might be thinking, oh, how do I learn about the canon and all that stuff and read more about like how you define SNS? Brian Murphy's Flame and Crimson: A History of Sword and Sorcery. Can't recommend it enough. I found that.
Take a shot.
Yeah, I know, right? Like, sorry, pardon me.
It's oft mentioned, that one.
Yeah, no, for good reason.
Yeah,
tonight I'm drinking Angry Redhead as a nod to Jarrell and Red Sonja. Anyway, but yeah, I mean, that book gets mentioned a lot for good reason, as Matt says, because it is a great history of the genre, and it does have a great way of looking at the genre as kind of something that has like these markers of common aspects of the genre, but it's like a flexible definition, which I love so much. And I do see the genre as something that has these signposts. You're like, yeah, well, we gotta have that, we gotta have that. And yet within those signposts, it's almost like something I haven't said for a while is I like to think of SNS as almost like a berserk wrestling ring, where you have these like hard points you want to have, like outsider protagonists, you often riffing off history, often having like horror influences and so on. But running between those posts are highly elastic ropes. You can do a lot within those boundaries. It's very flexible, which I really love. And that brings us to, the scene I think has been growing over the last few years. I'd like to say tentatively that we have perhaps a third wave of SNS building, which is exciting. And Dave, I'm going to ambush you here with the next thing I want to talk about, which is, when I came in, it felt like there were two big challenges the genre faced beyond, just getting more people into it. One of them was the sense that like people sometimes when you mention SNS, they'll think of like, oh, well, those like bad movies from the 80s, or, oh, I read like, one of the stories and there was like some racist terminology or something in it from like the 40s or whatever. Not a fan of that. And like, that's all well and good. And I don't begrudge anyone who was put off by that. But I do think that rep is fading just with time. You mention SNS to somebody in their 20s or even their early 30s, and they're just gonna be like, they haven't seen that stuff. And then maybe the bigger challenge is the other thing. And Dave, this is why I'm coming to you first. I feel like the bigger challenge with SNS in terms of growing it and evangelizing it is just what I call genre diffusion. It's largely laid fallow since like the late 80s. As I say, there's been more recent years things coming up, which has been great. But it's largely laid fallow. And as a result, when you say to a lot of people who aren't experienced with the genre yet, sorry, I was going to throw up a great comment here. Anyway, when you talk to people who haven't, run into it yet, they will tend to be like, oh, so sword and sorcery. So you mean just like wizards and shit, right? Like Lord of the Rings or like, whatever. And, I don't want to do the comic book shop guy, like push on my glasses and be like, well, actually, but it is a distinct, unique flavor. So the reason I keep highlighting you, Dave, is because you're doing this SNS anthology. You're currently wading through a pile of submissions, and you've been a good sport. You haven't named names, you haven't been mean, but you did say to me at one point, you're like, God damn, I'm getting a lot of submissions that are just not sword and sorcery. And so I'm curious, like,
Yeah. My first
Yeah.
50, I ended up getting something like just under 400 submissions for the book. And the first 50, there was one sword and sorcery story in the whole batch.
Wow.
And then I took a break and was nervous I was going to have to commission more work for it. And then I resumed after the submission period had closed. And in the last 50 stories, more than half were nailing it. So I was feeling better about that. But I do think that the genre is hindered by a title that can, like as Milton said, be perceived as like, if you have these two things, you're ticking the mark. And to some people it can mean that, and other folks will be like, but you haven't seen my index of the other criteria that you should be satisfying. So
you refer to my chart, yeah.
Yeah. So, and interestingly enough, even when I just started putting out the call that I was going to do this book, all of a sudden I got folks from the genre reaching out, really excited that I was wading in, and this is not an experience I have ever had with any other book that I've put out. So like when I did a post-apocalyptic book, it's not like the post-apocalyptic girlies were all like, "Hey, you want to hang?" So like sword and sorcery is different. Like, so I think that yeah,
I'm happy to be one of the SNS girlies. Sorry, go
on. So there's a hunger there for more work that scratches this itch. And Luana was saying earlier, like the appeal of Conan, and it reminded me of have y'all heard that someone has like a meme about it, but it's like playing an RPG video game gives you lets you experience the fantasy of setting
Getting
out
8 hours rest. Yeah.
setting out to achieve a task and
Yeah.
completing it, or actually getting 8 hours of sleep. So I think that the scope of what sword and sorcery is like scratches a certain itch, and that's why the folks who are really committed to the genre are so feral about it, is because they really love that itch. And I'm just trying to also help you scratch it, I guess.
Right on.
I have to add that so many things have come up that I need to comment on, but all I can think of is in my literal ADD brain is that like, well, Milton hasn't talked in a while, and I want him to be. I don't want to cut anybody else off, because I almost cut off Dave earlier because I wanted to say about the third wave so badly that, like, guys, we are in a third wave. We are. The only thing is the fantasy market has not shone the light on us in the mainstream, and maybe that happens. Maybe it doesn't, but that does not mean we are not in a third. There are more people writing and publishing sword and sorcery now than, well, in the last 15 years that I have been in this community or paying attention to it. This is a third wave, and it is actually immense. The question is, will something hit hard enough that people take note, and like huge publishers are like, yeah, let's lean into that, like we're leaning into Cozy, like. I just want to say, I'm saying right now unequivocally that like this is a third wave that we're in, because it is a little different than it has been, and well, let's see what happens. So that's it. You can quote me on that.
Well, do you think that maybe, and I'm throwing this out to everybody here, but obviously I'm kind of riffing off of Matt. Do you think the sign that we're really in a third wave is when we see big publishers, big 4 or 5, whatever they're hovering there, publishing sword and sorcery, like explicitly, sword and sorcery texts? And I'm sure there's lots of stuff being published that we can argue which is not IP, right? Because we've got new Conan, we've got new like Robert E. Howard characters, in the tiny short stories and stuff. We've got a new Red Sonja novel by Gail Simone, and a new Red Sonja film coming down the pipe. We'll talk about other, formats in a minute. Would it be the thing where like there's a new Lachmanin, novel being put out by Simon & Schuster, or a new, Orhan, or new Changa, like something being put out by a big publisher? Is that the line of success? Is that where we say, oh, the third wave is here, or
that's what I'm saying? Is I'm saying right now that the third wave is here, whether they're going to check in on it or not.
Sorry, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, because I just felt there was this hesitation among all of you guys here, and I just like, with what Milton has been doing for a while, what Oliver's doing now, the fact that we've got Dave and Luana who are more so like not necessarily newcomers, but are like trying their hand at it. And not to mention, the guys, there are so many people publishing this.
Yeah,
so many.
No, I
Yeah,
actually,
I think it would be. I think it would be the mainstream's getting into it because of what's been happening in the small press, and that's the way they normally do it. You know,
Yeah.
you get
music genres are the same, right?
Yeah, exactly. You get the growth here. You get what's going on, what we're all doing, and of course, when mainstream does it, they're going to want to go do it with something familiar. So they're going to go get the Conans and they're going to go get the Red Sonjas and stuff like that because they don't want to. Again, it's the risk averse, thing. And sometimes even when they do reach into that bag where you see somebody maybe less popular, by the time they get done with it, it's almost like you wish they had never touched it. because they start throwing their little things in that they think have to be there, and they just and I kind of, as much as I love Charles Saunders and his work, I also kind of use what happened to him as a cautionary tale, because when in the 70s, in the late 70s and the early 80s, Charles was publishing immoral stories everywhere. I was surprised at how much I saw that he was putting out. And so when it finally got to the point where he got to do his first novel, his first immoral book, all of a sudden, everything he had done over all those years wasn't good enough anymore. All of a sudden, the publishers had to change it. Immoral had to be ambiguous on the cover. All these different things like that. And it's like odd that this is the thing that got you here, but now all of a sudden, what got you here isn't good enough anymore. And that's the thing that the people who were reading you all these years would have followed you to read your book. And that seems to be something that I see a pattern. I see friends of mine who are in other genres that are going through this whole process, and they reach a certain amount of popularity, and they finally get to what we call the big time, and then all of a sudden, what they're doing is not good enough anymore. Now it has to be different.
Now, Milton, you know better than I do, but I'm curious to get your 10 cents on the side of this. From what I've seen in my sort of amateur scholarship, it always looks to me like poor Charles, also with his books, as opposed to the short stories earlier, kind of came in on the back end. Like, it's like the second wave of Sword and Sorcery was starting to really crest by the early 80s. A lot of the publishers were being a lot less experimental, were really winnowing down to the Clonan formula. Charles didn't get properly promoted, as the first Amaro book was really pushed as the Black Tarzan, which is like not right on a bunch of levels. There was a huge delay, and I want to say the second book, right, like kind of messed things up for him.
Mm-hmm.
So, there was some bad fortune there, and also the fact that, like, by the time, like, 82, 83, 84, we're getting into, the things were moving into a new direction, in part because the SNS publishers had been so repetitive and, like, creatively, we felt like we were on the tail end of a thing. And I always wonder what would have happened to Charles if he'd started 5 years earlier. I wonder what would have happened if Amaro had come out, like, 77 instead of, like,
So, what date did it come out, guys? I'm sorry. Was it like 80? What was the first time we saw Amaro?
Amaro was like the early 80s when the first novel came out. But the short stories had been coming out since like the 70s. I actually have some of them. People have been sending them to me over the years, and I was surprised at how much stuff he had written. In that time period. So it was like among Sword and Sorcery people. He was known. He was known. His work was being read. But then again, when we started getting to the publishing thing about it, getting to publishing with the major authors, the major publishers, that's when we started running into all the issues and stuff like that. And that's something that's it has something to do with Wave, but I have to be real. It has something to do with being a Black writer as well. That's something that you're going to run into. It's something that you have to be prepared for. It's the reason why I did indie as opposed to trying to publish my stuff, because I had looked at the market, and I knew what I wanted to write, and I knew that was going to be an issue. And my thing was that all I want to do is write my stories and get it to readers, and I don't want to have any of this other interference in me, in between me and the reader. So that's why I did what I did, and that's why once we did it, and once I met Charles, one of the reasons that we started doing the Griots anthology, because we thought about all the people that we knew that are people that we didn't know that wanted to write what we were writing, but didn't get the opportunity for various reasons. And that's why we did the anthologies. And it's a couple of people that you've published now. Kurt
that's
Johnson,
where I found Kurt Johnson. Yeah, man.
Kurt was publishing Griots, and Sarah was publishing Griots. So that's the kind of thing that I think is one aspect of it, and has something to do with, maybe some of the wave that's going now, because some of the things that kind of turned people away from sword and sorcery back in the day. And I even had that problem myself. Sometimes I get these sword and sorcery groups. I'm like, as much as I love Conan, that's all you guys are talking about.
Yeah, I gotta say, obviously, I think I made it pretty clear. I did Conan, guys. Don't yell at me. But you can't have a genre be one author, one character. That's not a genre. That's a cult. You gotta be willing to look a little wider. Yeah. Okay. So again, thank you for all that additional context, Milton. I guess the reason I brought that up was that I wonder sometimes about maybe there's just a boom and bust cycle we can't escape, and we got to ride the wave when we can, and is part of that inevitably, quotation marks, we'll reach a point where big publishers want to play with it, and that'll be exciting at first because SNS will be known by more people and get more distribution. But then, oh crap, no, we're getting to the part where they're, making it milquetoast and, whatever, and so on and so on. I don't know, especially because it's been so uneven across formats, right? Like when I say SMS has been fallow, largely it has been fallow prose and film for sure for quite a while until more recent years. But comics has never entirely gone away. There was definitely a period where there wasn't a lot of SNS comics, like in the 90s, I would say. But, as Lana was mentioning, there's Dark Horse Comics, good stuff coming out, 15, 20 years ago. Whereas yeah, go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention when Lana was talking about the Dark Horse Conan, that coincided with me being in, I was in film school at the time, and I'd been picking up old copies of Savage Sword of Conan. This is all stuff I had previously seen. But I started reading the books again and reading all of them. And man, during that time, the Dark Horse comics came out and they were fresh and they looked so good. Those Kerry Nord pencils were a big deal. And then, yes, it moved on to Thomas Giorello. And those are monumental for me. They speak to my generation specifically because I had been a kid in the 80s and I kind of missed Conan and Masters of the Universe even when they came out. And for the record, I'm not saying Masters of the Universe is sword and sorcery. I could argue that it's sword and sorcery. Let's move past it.
It's a
I just don't want someone being like, he keeps mentioning Masters of the Universe. It's not sword and sorcery. I know.
Stop doing that perfect imitation of me. Anyway.
Yeah. Anyways, I think that first they did some sneak previews. This is the time McFarlane had action figures as well. And I know I'm just nerding out on my Conan time, but that was almost my second wave of sword and sorcery when that started happening. And so, of course, I'd seen the original comics, but those Dark Horse comics were a big part. And I think you'll find a whole little slice of the fandom who at that time were like, yeah, I love Conan. And now these new comics are out and they've got that different Kerry Nord look.
Yeah. And the 2000s, I think, is a period that I certainly need to learn more about. Of course, one person who had a lot of impact on bringing us to this third wave that was doing a lot of good work back in the particularly dark ages of SNS was Howard Andrew Jones, who sadly has recently passed. But folks, if you don't know who I mean when I say Howard Andrew Jones, trust me, look him up. He is absolutely the giant. I mean, there's others who contributed, but he is the giant upon whose shoulders a lot of us are standing, particularly myself, I will include. And I just kind of brings me to another thing which I want to talk with you all about, and not just the publishers, Lana, you can get in there. I feel like the scene's been really evolving, even in just the last couple of years that I've been publishing. But those of you who've been involved or paying attention to it longer, or maybe we're newer to it, could offer different perspectives on this. It does feel like that third wave is happening, even if some of us are saying it kind of cautiously because we don't want to jinx things, or we feel like it's going to get bigger before we feel comfortable saying that. It does feel like some publications have come and gone or changed dramatically. Whetstone Magazine is basically played a big role in me getting into SNS, but there are new readers who don't know what it is. It's been in mothballs for a little over a year. I don't know what the plans are to bring it back or if it will come back. Meanwhile, Tales from the Magician's Skull, Howard Andrew Jones magazine, which absolutely there is no New Age Sword and Sorcery without Tales from the Magician's Skull. When that happened, huge inspiration for me. It's moved on to whole new owners, Outlander Entertainment from Goodman Games, with a new editor. And they've only got one issue out, so let's give them a minute, folks. Let's see what they do. But that's a big change as well.
Yeah.
And then meanwhile, you've got upstarts like myself, and then you've got even fresher upstarts, coming in from other avenues. Like obviously we've got Dave with Shadow of the Sun. We've got Weird Punk Books, Sam Richards coming in with Profane Altars and Profane Sorcery and Profane Altars 2 coming soon. We had Outland Entertainment again, but in a different way, coming through with the Swords and the Shadows, like horror SMS anthology edited by Cullen Bunn. And there's other stuff too. Cosmic Horror Monthly is just barely mentioned. I think they're going to do an SNS magazine whose name escapes me. My apologies, but they are doing that. So the point is that there's like, and I'm sure I miss people. I mean, that's part of the joy, right? Is we're at a place now where you can't. It's not easy to read all of the SNS that comes out in the year, and it's even hard for me to like name all of the SNS that's popping up lately. So I think that's a good sign, because some people will say, like Indie Pub in particular, they'll be like, "Oh, it's just a whole bunch of writers mailing the same $5 back and forth to each other or whatever." But I don't think that actually scans for me, and I want to throw that back out to y'all. I think there is real growth happening. It's not just a bunch of people going, "Oh, all of a sudden publishing's the jam." But if only because, like, just think about people who love this thing, who love SFF in general, right? I feel like you don't have one writer for every reader. I think it's way skewed differently than that. I think you have at least 10 or 20 or 50 readers before one of them goes, "I think I want to write some stories." And then way more of those people before you get to someone who goes, "I think I'm going to actually submit one of my stories." And then even fewer of those people, very few of those people actually wake up in the morning and go, "Well, I've just, gone criminally insane. I think I'm going to publish." And so, like, how do you feel? And I'm going to pick a person here, but I'm just going to say the question first. How do you feel about this scene really growing, and the proportion of people who are actually, writing and creating or whatever versus quote unquote professionally, or like really getting their feet in, versus those who are maybe just in quotation marks readers? Gosh, I'm kind of talking over the show. So this is the problem when you love something so much. Like I said earlier, you get excited and you kind of get mush mouth. But it's like, I don't know. Luana, leap in, please. Save me from myself.
Hey, I wanted to bring up because Milton said that Charles Saunders had the problems getting published, and being real, it's partially because he was a Black writer. I recently read Imaro for the first time, and I actually really connected to the character, and on a meta level, as a writer, the idea that well, Imaro as a character obviously has no home. Like, he's trying to find a home, and learning a little bit about the backstory, that Charles was kind of the same. He was selling Imaro here and there, and by the 80s he kind of fixed it up into a novel and got it published. And if you are a person that grows up with stories like Conan, and you're kind of, because like Conan, Amaro is also a guy who is like the hardest motherfucker who oh, he's in a jam. What's he gonna do? Oh, turns out he's just too strong. He's gonna kick ass, which is that's great. And as I read Conan as a young kid, I was like, yeah, I love that Conan's kicking ass and always being the best at that thing. But Conan is a white dude. And I was like, while I enjoy Conan, while I enjoy him excelling at all those things, I always thought it would be cool if someone who was a bit more like me would kick ass in all those myriad fashions that Conan does. And while I was reading Imaro, I was like, well, I guess 50 years ago, Charles Saunders thought the same. And I even though obviously I am not a Black man, but I was super. I felt super connected to Imaro, because I too am a reader and a writer who enjoys certain stories, certain certain emotional catharses that strictly on page are not given to people like me. If you're lucky, you get there's Red Sonjas and there's Jarrells, but yeah, I am a queer woman. You know, you can be. I think it took like 45-ish years or something like that before they made Red Sonja bisexual. So you know, and you got to be you got to be lucky to have one of those. Um, and yeah, so that was kind of why I was like, maybe I can be a part of that. You know, start making stuff like that. Be providing people like me with that kind of release, with that kind of escapism, that like, hey, you know, the world can be scary. There's a Hyborian age out there for people like us. The normal world is a Hyborian age. We you know we can't go to the post office without, you know, someone yelling stuff at us or uh, or trying to start shit. But wouldn't it be cool if you didn't have to be scared, if you could be like a Imaro or like a Conan? And um, that is something that in my writing I want to convey, and I'm seeing that with more and more uh, writers. With you know, we've had in New Edge, we've had Sword and Soul in every issue. I think almost every issue.
I think so. Yeah.
We've had Sword and Silk, Dario, and Bryn. So,
Jeremy Pack Nelson. Yep.
yeah,
Well, I
yeah.
think
We've had queer stuff in every in every issue, and like that means a lot because I was reading Sarah Macklin's story in one or two,
yeah.
and
One,
um,
I think. Yeah.
well, okay, yeah, and it's like these two African or fantasy African ladies that are like kind of a Sherlock and Watson. Like they're out to investigate something, and I was just assuming that they were gay for each other, and and at the end of it, there's like a twist that like, oh, you know, she's actually in love with the Lord, and that was had hired them, and I realized something. I had read so many queer stories in New Edge that my brain had gone into I am reading a queer publication mode, but it's not. New Edge is not a queer publication, but my brain has been trained to if you read mainstream stuff, oh, you'll be lucky to see, you know, one or two side characters that's queer, but New Edge has been so good about that they could have been queer, and that means a lot that you are reading a non-specifically queer publication, and they're there, you know, just like it's not specifically um, a Black or Asian publication, but there's always, you know, POC stories, you know, and I think that is great because I remember reading Fritz Leiber, and in the first couple of stories, like there's a lot of women fridging in the early Fafford and Grey Mousers, and a bit later they encounter two cool lesbian thieves in The Greatest Thieves in Langmar, and my brain went into, oh no, they're so cool, but Leiber's gonna kill them soon, right?
Oh.
That was legit the first thing I thought. I was I was guys, I was hoping they would not return because Leiber would kill them. I was like, oh, just that
Lana,
they
what story
flew
was it? I'm sorry. Which story did you mention?
the two greatest thieves in Langmar.
Okay, because yeah, you've got me on edge because I've read like a handful of Liber stories, but it's the it's Ilmet and Longmar where their ladies get killed,
Yeah.
and then it's like this lethal weapon situation, you know?
Yeah, it's their motivation. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I
Which
think what you're
that's a
talking
whole other
about is
conversation.
something that I mean, it's always been, you know, I don't think it's ever been the readers. I think it's been the publishers.
Right, right.
I mean, over the years, I write specifically a certain genre, a certain way, and I've never had a problem selling my books to anybody because good stories are good stories, and you read a good story, you're gonna like a good story. That's just the bottom line, and I think it's just been a matter of not so much training the readers, but getting publishers used to the fact that all these things that you think are going to keep people from reading the books aren't really going to do that, because readers are more sophisticated than you give them credit for.
If stories are good, yes.
Yeah,
like,
and if the
that's
story's
such
good,
a
they're going to
truth.
read it. You know, if they don't like that kind of story, they're not going to pick it up. You know, and that's
Mhm.
just been my case. And I think that's part of the reason of, you say, the third wave of sword and sorcerers, because you have people like New Edge that are, putting out these, I say, traditional stories, but they're showing them in ways where everybody feels included in the stories, in the storylines.
Right.
I've seen it myself. I mean, I let out the first Changa book almost like 10 years ago, but it's been the past couple of years where I've seen the book selling to where I don't have to be there to sell them. I'm seeing sales come every month now. People are like, buying the Changa stuff, and I'm like, okay, where's this coming from? And I'll be honest, when I first started writing Changa Safari, I was specifically writing it for young Black men like myself. But it was like 10 years for the book to be out before I actually saw a generation of young Black men coming to me looking for this book and buying the book. It's almost like I had to wait for these kids to grow up, to get to the point where that was what they were looking for and seeking. And I think one of the challenges, though, and I see it all the time, is that we're dealing now with the generation that's more visual. And usually when you ask them, do you read this or read, if you ask them about science fiction or anything, their references are always visual. They very seldom will they give you a book. They'll say, oh, like this movie or like that show or something like that. And that's I think that's one of the challenges that you have with sword and sorcery, is that, most of the visual stuff we have now, I mean, we have some new stuff coming, but most of it's old, and and they're seeing it a certain way. But I think that's one of the things that I think about as a publisher. And that's why I look at, that's why we did a Changa Safari comic book, because we knew there were people that would never pick the novel up, but they would pick the comic book up, and they have. And once they read the comic book, then they want to read the novel. We're working on a Changa Safari animation right now, because we know there's more people that just watch animation.
Man, those comics look awesome.
Thank you. They did. Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you. See, they did not come out the way that I thought they were going to come out. I was thinking Frazetta, Viejo. That's what I was thinking. So when they came back and started showing me the artwork, I was like, okay, I got to sit down and think about this for a minute. I don't know if I like this.
You know what? It looks like animation is the thing. Like, I think it will perfectly lend itself for you to make that hop over to animation for sure.
Exactly.
Like, it's almost built in. It's got the right coloring. Yeah.
It took me a while to get it, but the artist, the guy who did the comic book, Jason Reeves of 133 Art, he was the one who I said, I want to do a comic book. He said, okay, let me handle it. I'll get the artist, I'll get all the kind of stuff, I'll get the person to write stories. And then he started bringing me the pages, and I was like, okay, that's not what I was thinking. And I had to look at it for a while, but then I saw what he was trying to do.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, yeah, let's do it and stuff like that. So
yeah, I hear you, Milton, on the importance of visuals, but I think that's also like, maybe it's a challenge for SNS in terms of the prose, but I think it's also good for SNS because it has been so associated with its art, particularly since, of course, a certain little guy named Frazetta. But I mean, yeah, like it's one of the many reasons why I love investing so much in the art, why we have the double art stretch goal for our magazine. But also, I'm not the only one thinking about it. Obviously, you are too. Matt, I know you and I've talked many times about the importance of cover art in general, but
not even, but in sword and sorcery, it's so important, guys. It's so important. There is, like, in other genres, yes, art is important, but I'm telling you that in sword and sorcery, it is a little more than every other genre. The art matters in the sense that it is a visual aesthetic, like even kind of writing, like it's got the muscularity and the flames and all of the stuff, man. It's always
the body and the weird horror. It's
very,
very visual. Like, I'm curious, Dave, did you feel yourself thinking a little differently about art as you came to Shadow of the Sun?
I know. I mean, it's a visual language, right? So I think you're speaking you're speaking both with this genre in a way that maybe you're not with others. Certainly not with post-apocalypse. I don't know. Like the art stretch goal was one that I had with our crowdfund, but it was sort of in my head, like, if I don't hit that, I'm gonna move the earth to have the art anyway, because it felt so necessary. And I'm a sucker for like metal stylings as well, so like that aesthetic works really well for the book. Even though I think occasionally when I table, like a lot of my logo has kind of a metal look. And when I table places, like folks will come up excited to like hear the music, and then it's gay books, and they're like, "Oh man!" So there's a little bit of a bait and switch for some people.
I love the idea though of someone picking up one of your books and they open it and like those gift cards, like the music comes out. Anyway, sorry, go on.
I gotta work on my swag.
Yeah.
I want to drop one thing though, Dave. When you mentioned Samuel Delany and Neveron, a lot of things. One thing is that people don't realize that he was publishing those books around the same time Charles was doing Tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know, and he was, you know, and I never heard of him till I met Samuel Delany a few years ago when he came to the Decatur Book Festival, and I got a chance to sit down and talk to him, and that's when I first heard about the books. And then I started reading them. I was like, oh, he did this around the same time. And it was his take on, so instead of having this young virile guy running around the muscular stuff, this, you know, his main character was an older guy, you know. And so it was so many things that he did to put sword and sorcery on his head that I think a lot of people missed it. And that's why I always tell people, if you're really looking at sword and sorcery and want to know what you get in the history, that's actually a book series that you need to have.
Yeah, I mean, I recommend it both for like the simple thrill of like all the tropes are there, but then the head game of just, it's like a really smart take on everything, so you can kind of read it through both the levels. There's one article at one point where he was saying that, because they're all stories, it's like some of them are short, some of them are novellas, they're all different lengths. He really bends the rules when he's digging into it too, especially in the later books. But his whole approach involved like whatever solved the problems in one story, he often made the causer of the problems in later stories. So he was always sort of iterating on like what makes a story work and like what makes like a hero. So yeah, I can talk about him for a long time.
And there's a lot of and then I'll be quiet. There's a lot of there's a lot of African fantasy which would be considered sword and sorcery, but most of their work is being done in comic books and visual and graphic novels. They're not being written in novels. There's one in particular by a guy by the name of Peter Daniels. He has a story called Cheoma, and Cheoma is like amazing. I mean, the artwork is amazing. He's actually doing he has an animated series on YouTube that he's been doing on it and stuff, and it's great. I mean, I actually I tell people some of my friends stuff, I like it so much that I sell it. You know, and his is one of the things, I sell his graphic novel because it just looks that good. And it's so centered in African culture, but at the same time, when you look at it, it's basically sword and sorcery.
I've been consuming a lot of sword and sorcery like sideways outside of like venues that I think are producing it on purpose, so to speak. Because I was also thinking about like speaking of like another Black writer who is marketed another way, but so Kai Ashante Wilson's Tor.com novella Sorcerer of the Will Deeps is like nearly like perfect sword and sorcery, if you ask me. And I really tried to get him for the anthology, but just he's got a lot of stuff going on. But like
same.
But they're not being marketed as sword and sorcery really. So that's interesting too. It's just like, how do sometimes you find these things by accident or through unexpected places.
Yeah. That brings it back to Utah. Who said, I think it was you, Dave, I think, who said like that sword and sorcery is just this weird, it's almost a title we have to grapple with. It's like Fritz Lieber. Sorry guys, I don't know, and I'm never going to get it right because
it's Lieber as far as I'm aware.
Say one thing one way. Okay. We have decided it's sword and sorcery, and honestly, the fact that Howard Andrew Jones said sword and sorcery with such zeal and like appreciation, like it has to be sword and sorcery, but that is a little thing that we do have to grapple with, is that it's becomes it's a palette for anything fantasy that has swords and or sorcery, right?
Well, that's why we got to teach the people, Matt. We got to show them how they're wrong.
Guys, there's one thing I have just been bursting to say, because when Luana and Milton both, like, and especially talking about like Charles Saunders, and then Luana, you talking about the sword and sorcery has a outsider protagonist, almost like most of the dyed in the wool stories are like, it's an outsider protagonist. So Luana, I think what you described, I have long thought this when I think about, because obviously representation in sword and sorcery is a thing that, like, it had happened before. Of course, there was women writers and things along the way, but I think the outsider protagonist, when you have somebody who has outsider feelings or anything where it's like, I haven't seen these things, it so lends itself to what sword and sorcery is at its core, that like it is, those are stories we need to hear, and we need to hear a lot of them because it's such a great fit. It is not like I don't know.
No,
Anyways,
yeah,
I'm just so
absolutely.
pleased with like the amount of cool stories going on right now.
Well, you know what, man? I think I can I can take what you're doing and alloy it into what should probably be my closing question, because we have been chatting
There's
for about
that
an hour.
verb.
And I love the genre, and I feel like, you know, if people were game, I've talked for another hour, but you know, we'll see what people feel like doing after we get through the last of my prepared questions, because I feel like you're tap dancing toward it. Well, Matt, you know, you're already talking, so why don't we start with you on this one? I'm curious, you know, whether you've been in the scene for 20 years or 20 minutes, you know, um, what is something positive that you've been really happy to see in terms of change in the scene in recent years? And what
Oh,
would you
dude.
really love to see in the future beyond, you know, 1 million sales?
So it's what I was actually just describing, is that sword and sorcery feels like it is what it's now open to various walks of life. I'm not saying it never was. I'm saying that like right now we have just enrichment. Okay, it's always just this enrichment when you have all of these different publishers doing different things. I mean, Sword and Sorcery Classic is all over the place still, and that's great. There's so much happening now from such cool perspectives, and there's a lot of leanings into horror that I'm digging a lot, right? And I mean, even all the stuff we were talking about with the visual medium. Holy shit, Brian Murphy said something. I think
there we go,
SNS
Brian
might need
Murphy,
a giant snake in it to qualify, but not sure.
I gotta pause for a sec. I gotta interrupt with the moderator. I just want to give a shout out to Discord user Bergie, who coined a phrase that is absolutely burned on the inside of my eyes, and I've been riffing on it a lot lately, where he said, "What if sword and sorcery is when the snake is big?" You know, because there's just a lot of giant snakes in SNS, and I just love the idea of that being the one marker. Is the snake big? If so, it's SNS. Anyway,
Desert,
sorry.
Brussels, big snake.
Yeah, anyway, pardon me.
Make it snake.
Oh dear, and we have one of our authors and community members who themselves actually keep lots of genuinely big snakes, like
no step on snake
lifestyle is SNS. But anyway, pardon me, folks. I saw a snake opportunity and had to take it. Anyway, sorry, Matt. Please continue.
Oh shit. Okay, so you had asked me.
I was saying about positive change in the scene recently.
Yeah. So
where you want to hope.
What I want to see is what I see, and also I'm seeing just such a dedication to art. You know, I know we get worried about like AI art, and we do, you know, show fangs at it and stuff. But by and large, this community is not that, and that's awesome, because AI AI is a whole separate topic, but I'm not down with it. And this is a community that is not by and large using it. You're seeing like AI slop just thrown up on a Facebook group or something. But man, the art is looking good. So I would like to see the art maintain. I want to see our just rockin' stories published everywhere we can. There's so many publishers with so many talents. I think the idea of doing bests of sword and sorceries, or even within our own community, because I know we get together and we talk about all these things and like what it is, and maybe we self-aggrandize about our own genre, but like we have to do it because we're the people to do it.
You got to evangelize, right?
Like
more than the people who love it.
in every sense of evangelize that isn't icky.
Yeah, well,
that makes sense, you know.
No, we got to get organized.
The heart of that, of the zeal, the passion. Yeah. So that's for me, man. I would, like, let's see more great art, more great storytelling, and like just keep doing what we're doing.
Yeah, all right. Everything but more so. Great. Milton, I mean, you know, you're not new at this. How are you feeling about, you know, recent times and where you want to see it go?
I think I like what I'm seeing. I like what you're doing. I like what I see more, like I said, I see more magazines out covering sword and sorcery than I've ever seen before when I first got into it. My only disappointment is that I haven't been able to write and submit as many stories as I would like to. because I'm a publisher, and
Yeah.
so I'm publishing and I write a story when I can. But I like the fact that we're seeing the stories coming from different cultures and different perspectives. I think that and that in itself to me makes it more inclusive, because a sword and sorcery story is a story, but to be able to see the story and connect with it, and see that there's someone in that story that looks like you, or someone in that story is coming from your culture, your genre, or your gender perspective, makes it even more brings you more into the story. I know as a young person growing up, a lot of times I would read these stories and I would feel like I enjoyed them and stuff like that, but I would feel like I was on the outside looking in, that this was happening to somebody else. And if I tried really hard, I could put myself in that place. I would have loved if I had discovered Immoral when I was that age, because that was when I was in college. And if I had come across those stories, I tell some people, I said, if I had read Charles Saunders, I probably wouldn't even written Sword and Soul. I was like, this is what I've been looking for. This is it. I don't need to write it now. Somebody's doing it. And when we met each other, it was funny because we both started doing it for the same reasons. But to see it, when we talk about it from that perspective, I want to see it, stuff come from, like Japanese cultures, Chinese cultures, Indian. I want to see those stories coming from those cultures, because even though it's the same, I'm not gonna say the same, even though there's a DNA there, bringing it in from a different culture and the details of that culture brings a freshness to it, and I think that's what's making it appeal to a larger group of people. And I want to see more of it. As far as the future is concerned, I just think it's a matter of I don't necessarily go for trends. I don't think trends are as potent as they used to be, because now, since we're in this world where you can get information from anywhere, nobody can just say now that that's not hot anymore. Nobody can just say that, because and just shut it down when you had the gatekeepers. Now you can say that, but it's still coming from all different angles and stuff.
Right.
But I think the issue is going to be more generational. The technology that people that generations are used to coming up with. Me, I'm probably the old guy of the group. I'll be 65 in July. So I'm seeing all that. I mean, my first computer game was Pong.
Are you serious? Are you actually 65? You're getting 65?
Yeah, damn, you look good.
Yeah, dude, I would have said 55.
Seriously,
I'm the old head of the group.
Oh man, I would not have ever in a million years said 65. I would have been like 54.
Yeah, same.
I'll tell you a real quick joke. They said black doesn't crack, but it sure does creak. But
listen, it does not crack. I don't know how to say it. That has been the most true idiom I have heard. I'm just like,
but I think that with
go put on some more sunscreen. Sorry.
They're consuming entertainment in different ways. Yeah. And if we're looking at really growing it, we need to be aware of those, and not saying that you have to do them, because everybody has their expertise in the things they like to do. But I think you need to be aware of them. We're doing comic books now, but my son he's all in the web comics. That's what he reads. And so I'm thinking to myself, how do we take Changa or anything else that we're doing and adapt it into a web comic? So I'm always looking at all these different ways that people are receiving their information and seeing if it's something that we want to do, but knowing that even if we don't do it, somebody else is going to do it. So I think that's just progress. This is the way it is.
Yeah, if I can just very briefly riff on two things you said before we move on to another person. First of all, your story about Charles.
This whole conversation has been awesome. I'm sorry I'm interrupting you.
No,
there's so many things I want to follow up on, and I can't.
I know, right? I know.
I'm
going to throw my weight around as moderator, and I'll do that a little bit for a second.
You got to.
To what to your story about Charles. I mean, I just think about how many other people have that story. Kurt Johnson. He said about how he read Conan from a very young age and other SNS, but it wasn't until he found Charles when he was in college. He thought, I could do that. So as ever, representation matters. And we should always, be honoring the people who broke the path. There's a reason we had you write that profile on Charles and about your friendship with him that we published. It's this thing of, I'm very interested in the new, but I think along the way, we want to keep honoring and reteaching newer generations about, those who came before, of course.
It's like, you got to listen to Black Sabbath along with whatever. We have to go back, guys.
We were all here. Well, most of us are all here because of Conan.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like, yeah, look what happened. We were all telling our origin stories with the genre. Right?
Desert,
Yeah,
muscles,
inescapable.
Conan.
Yeah, desert muscles Conan with wizards. But and then also to the new thing, I mean, just a toss off thought. I don't have a big conversation about this, but I've had a friend tell me, "Oh, Oliver, you got to develop an app." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And they're like, "Yeah, no, a lot of kids like to read short fiction entirely through like just apps made for reading short fiction and just going through like what's it called, Royal Road or whatever. I should know this better when an author publishes on it. Just yeah, I don't know. I just like I got to develop software. What? I'm in the arts, man. Get it? What? Anyway, so yeah, lots of interesting hurdles to navigate to try and connect with people. Dave, what are you loving in Sword and Sorcery as a guy who's kind of coming in from the outside, and what are you hoping to see more of going forward?
Okay, I want to pitch. You do a joint issue with the folks from Choreo.
Who?
So Choreo do SFF magazine, all written from immigrant diaspora perspectives.
Oh yeah, I know them. Sorry. Yeah. My brain spelled it
I
different.
clicked too.
Yeah. So I'm just like, I feel like a New Edge Choreo joint issue would be incredible. And then, I don't know, maybe you need to do like I was gonna say the Red Wave, the New Wave anthology, and collect some of the best stuff from this new crop of the genre. And it seems like you're uniquely positioned for that, and I think I would like to see that.
Oh. Well,
Man, if you don't do it, I might do that. That's a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm going to do it before you can, Matt. I'm going to give a shout out to the Book of Blades anthology series.
Thank you.
Which absolutely does its best to try and showcase.
A Book of Blades, he said. A Book of Blades now available on Amazon. There's 3 books in the series. If you need a sampling of like some of the very best contemporary sword and sorcery, except Milton isn't in there, and that just actually is like gonna need Luana. You're gonna be in the next one.
Do volume 4.
Hey, listen, if we do volume 4, I will give you both
featuring
invites
Milton Davis. That's what
right now. Both of you guys, like not in, like you're in. If you want to write me, it's just about like how much we can pay, but each issue we get to pay more. Sorry, I just turned this into a Book of Blades. Let's.
No, Matthew, you didn't turn it into that. I did. It's okay. I set you up.
You did. Thank you, and I appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
But yeah, no, I hear you, David. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I've been trying to reach out and use things like this very conversation to try and build more bridges out to other publications. And yeah, if nothing else, next time we do a live chat about an SNS story or whatever, I should reach out to the editors of Choreo because I am curious about what they're doing. To learn more about
Dave, do you write too? I don't want to be rude because do you write Sword and Sorcery? Or you will? You're willing to?
I've written a few or two.
It just felt bad. I felt wrong that I didn't offer you
Book of Blades 4 featuring Milton Davis and Dave Ring and some other assholes.
And Oliver, if you want to do it too, man, you can go in there as well.
You've had me in.
Yeah, listen, the only thing is you have to be willing to accept what we're able to pay. And I
don't care, man. I'm down. I'm earning my indie pup cash grab over here. I don't need to be paid my running. Anyway, that's a whole other story, folks. How much? Sorry, Dave, I kind of stepped on you a bit there, but do you feel you've given your answer, or is there something more you want to add? You're good.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm sorry, Dave. You're invited to. Oliver, you are.
Yeah. Folks, I mean, never literally said networking is not a dirty word. Making friends is a big part of the fun of getting into any scene, I think. And honestly, part of what made me aware of Luana was just Luana saying hi. You got to let people know you exist. Luana, I know you're the sort of the newbie to the current scene, but in the time you've been here and what have you liked in the sense of this is changing in a good way. This is heading in a direction I dig, or what's something positive about the SNS scene as you have experienced in the time you've been in it, and what are you hoping to see more of going forward?
Well, it's been super welcoming. I'm so new to the SNS scene that I can't even speak of an evolution because I've not seen how it was. I've been here for maybe a year, so I can just say how I've experienced it so far. And there's been quite a few venues to pitch my ideas at, to submit at, to talk shop with people, and I've never felt that the doors were kept shut for the type of person that I am. We don't want your a voice like yours in whatever publication. So what would I like to see going forward? Well, I guess I would like to see myself being successful. Because like in as far as like what as a noob, I can't imagine a more welcoming space, to be honest. Like, I mean,
Right.
I just, I've talked to everyone here. I think Milton, you're the only person that is new to me, and it was a pleasure to meet you. By the way,
So nice to
and
meet you. It's been a long time since I've been adjacent. And like, yes, oh man, so nice to meet you. Both, like, oh yeah.
Matt, what?
I think Matt was talking to Milton there.
Did it freeze? Yeah. No, you said it was nice to meet Milton, and I'm just, my ADD went back to like I've known Milton in adjacent fandoms for so long that it's
Right.
just this is the first time we've actually met. Like, I know mutual friends with him, like Daedrin Sneed, who I met at Gen Con a couple times, and like,
Yep.
anyways, I'm just following along, and my head's bouncing back and forth on this late. What is it? Tuesday. Anyways, carry on. Wednesday.
Anyways,
Matt.
100%. And I wanted to say, Luana, you are like one of my, you've been a good friend in this community. I have enjoyed you since you've shown up, and it's felt like more than a year to me.
That's
In a good way.
yeah, you're like, it's fucking correct.
Yeah, it's like, well, he shut up. Like, it's a year. It felt like a decade.
I've known you for an hour, Luan. It's felt like more than a year. No, yeah, I think the scene is great and it's very welcoming. I have been, creative and producing stories at a rate I literally never have in my life, because everyone is so just so encouraging, and sometimes you get in somewhere, sometimes you eat shit. That's how it is, and that's fine. Like I was just the other day, I was we have a New Edge Discord, and there's a channel with markets, and Jay, one of our editors, they said they said it was funny that I just, like, whenever someone posts a market, I just reply to it and go like, I'm gonna submit to this, you guys. And then later, like a couple days later, I ate shit on this one, you guys. And I see like submission pages, they're like, please don't self-reject. And I'm like, why would I self-reject? I'm gonna submit you guys to what I'm doing, and if it sucks, then it sucks. That's what our whole back and forth is about. I don't take it personal. It just wasn't what you were looking for at that time. Who cares? There's another channel somewhere, or maybe I get new ideas and I rework it, which is a strategy that worked. And it is just so exhilarating and energizing to just be in this place with so many people, so many different voices, so many lovely dogs that
I just realized we have a third dog has hit the stream. Yeah.
What's the dog's name,
Matt? Louis.
Louis. Oh. Hi, Louis. Yeah, that was my rather rambling answer. I think the scene is great, and may it be like this. I know that there's boom and bust cycles, and I guess the bust will eventually come, but I'm gonna ride this boom, y'all. I'll be bouncing on this boom as long as it's there.
Right on.
Leo meme pointing at dog. Sorry.
Yeah, there we go.
Dave, what's your dog called?
Yeah, hang on, Dave. What's your dog's name?
What is your dog's title, Dave?
This dog can be addressed as Gimlet.
Gimlet. Hello, Gimlet.
Beauty.
All right. Well,
Milton, go find a dog or a cat.
Yeah,
we'll take anything you
all right,
got.
man.
Hamster.
You got a minute.
Milton, you are failing this life.
If I was a pet person, I'd be a cat person. I used to have a cat.
They
back
poop
in
in
the
a
day.
box.
My
It's
daughter has
easy.
one now, but I do like. I grew up around farm dogs, so I'm like,
Oh yeah.
Let's go hunting type of dogs.
Right on. Well, listen, we've been talking for an hour and a half, and fuck me, man,
Whoa.
I'm just enjoying your company so much, and obviously we all like the subject matter. We could talk for another hour and a half, but
Yeah.
speaking of dogs, I got one. I should probably see if she needs to poop. So in the meanwhile,
Yeah, from all the
That's
cheese
his
you
way
gave
of
us.
saying he needs to poop. The show is over. He
the
has to
show is
go.
over, guys. I'm feeling movements in the scene here that I need to address. What?
It's just
Anyway.
what I chose to eat for dinner. Like, you know, it's not.
Sword and
No,
Sorcery
seriously.
also has body horror. And
I do.
one of my
I
favorite
literally have
elements.
commissioned an article for one of the issues this year of Sword and Sorcery as a genre of the body. So
Who's writing it? Who's writing it?
and-
sensuous momentum down your bowels.
sensuous momentum we got to in the server at one point there. Yeah. Which of course makes you sound like something else, but hey, why not?
I just pushed you to try to admit or to reveal a detail leak.
But yeah. So again, I just want to say huge thanks, Milton, Dave, Matt, Luana. Also shout out to Graham Wilcox at Oldman Quarterly, who I hoped would join us tonight, but he's had surgery, he's recovering, so he's got to.
Oh, that's too bad.
He'll be fine in the long run.
He's a good dude, man. He's a good editor of stories.
Yeah, no, great. Well, I mean, he published you, so
Yeah, and like he's just a dude. Like working with him on the edits was fun. He's just he's fucking sharp. He's a sharp dude. You can tell.
No, he really is, actually. I mean, I really like his new novella that's come out. Folks, check that out. But anyway, yeah. So shout out to Graham. We'll have him back on some live stream at some point, no doubt. When Quarterly's another great SNS publication. Check it out, folks. SNS and Dark Fantasy. It's got its own take. But yeah, just gonna throw the last comment here. Up. There you go, Sword and Sandal. Yep. So we got Nicholas Diak here. By the way, Nicholas Diak, for those who don't know, he is our new Sword and Sorcery cocktail author this year. When you go to the back issues 5, 6, 7, you will find cocktails, named for various characters across the genre, including the Sword and Planet issue. And Nicholas is cooking those up for us. So I look forward to getting those out there for you all to enjoy. Oh. Also, if anybody has ever made any of the cocktails in our issues, please post a photo or even a short clip of you enjoying them. I'd love to see it. But anyway, I digress. Pardon me. So again, thank you to everybody for joining us. Thank you so much for chatting about what some call tongue-in-cheek, others more sincerely the sacred genre, and what it is and what it can be, where it's going, and all that good stuff. I really, really am myself excited for the future. I realize I kind of skipped over my own question there because I feel like I talk enough as is, and I'm the moderator. I should lean back, but I will just say real briefly. I've been really happy to see the scene growing. I've been really happy to get to past a point where one person can easily consume all of it, because I think that's a sign of good health. I feel like the scene is getting healthier, it's getting broader, it's getting more people, it's getting more points of view, it's getting more kinds of stories. All of this is it's healthy, man. It's healthy. And I really look forward to in the future, I guess, more, I mean, is there anything more specific that I can say other than more? And that isn't just me going, well, I want to publish, more and do better in my own ventures. I guess, I wouldn't mind seeing more SNS movies. I really enjoyed The Northman. I look forward to hopefully enjoying Red Sonja. We've also had more indie level stuff. Like there's a Deathstalkers sequel, prequel, remake, something like that coming down the pipe. I have not yet seen it yet, but The Slave and the Sorcerer was
you
pretty
need to get
high
in
effort.
touch with those dudes. I want to talk to them. They should be on one of these show streams.
Yeah, get on Rogues or something, man. I feel like
give them yo, bro. I'll give you Rogues, man.
Yeah. I feel.
Do you know what I'm offering you, man?
I feel like there's room even for more, which is a thing. Like I said, as someone who is publishing, you might think, oh, do you want more competition? I don't know. I really do feel like rising tides lift all boats and all that good stuff. And I really feel like there's room for more, and that the more of us that are publishing, the more of us that are trying to bring in new readers. Because as we were saying earlier on, who's more passionate than the people who lose their minds and actually decide to throw in and publish, right? Yeah.
Dave.
Sold out. Yeah, I know. It's poor Dave. You've been at it longer than me. We'll see how much I shake my head in a couple of years. But in the meanwhile, so yeah, thank you all for coming out. Thank you all for chatting. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for checking that recording. If you're watching this in the future, thank you all to everybody. I got to bring it back. Sorry, folks. Thank you all to everybody who's been supporting our crowdfund. It's been doing bigger and better than ever, better than last year, which is very exciting. We still have days yet to go. As I say this, it is March 5th. We got about 10 days or slightly less left. Noon EST, Saturday, March 15th is when it ends. Although we have overtime, if you pledge in the last 10 minutes, then boop, another 10 minutes, and I can just keep going. I'm really curious to see how long we can keep that ball juggling in the air. And I'm really hoping we get more pledges, not just because, yay money, but also because, as I said, we are now starting to work through our pay raises for our authors and artists, and that's very important to me as well. Plus, more money means more we can invest in doing more books and then pay more artists and authors, throughout the next year, right? So it all comes around in a way that I find very satisfying. So yeah, if you haven't already, please pledge, and if you have, please tell your friends and your enemies and your friends to lovers and your lovers to enemies and your dogs. So yeah, all that said, I'll talk forever. Is any of you have spoken to me before? No. So luckily tonight I remembered to hit the big red button, started the stream. You know what? I think I might press the one that ends it. So again, thanks everybody. Oh wait, hang on. Matt.
Oh. Right. You cold-blooded bastard. I hope you save room for my fist, because I'm going to jam it into your stomach and break your goddamn spine. Good night.
There we go. Now I can end the stream. Thanks, y'all.
Yeah, thank you.